Good evening to one and all. I am Dimple Jangid, Campus Ambassador for Vaze College of Arts, Science and Commerce, based in Mumbai, and it is my privilege and pleasure to welcome here our speakers for the day, Mr. VP Raja sir and Mr. MR Reddy sir. And I also welcome our principal, Dr. BB Sharma sir, our vice principal, Dr. Preeta Nilesh ma'am, and all the dignitaries and attendees present here. I, on behalf of Public Concern for Governance Trust in association with VG Vaze College, organized by Department of Political Science, would like to welcome you all to this webinar on the topic Role of Civil Servants in Ensuring Good Governance. Our college, Kelkar Education Trust, was established by late Sri Anna Sahib Vaze and his sons in 1979. VG Vaze College is a multi-faculty institution established in 1984 by the trust. Vaze College is the first NAC accredited college in the state of Maharashtra with top 5-star ranking and was re-accredited in 2005 as well as 2012 with A grade. It is one of the finest teaching learning education institutions in the country and has emerged as a role model of quality academic institutions. Speaking of PCGT, Public Concern for Governance Trust is a registered trust founded by Mr. Julio Ribeiro sir, Dr. R.K. Anand sir, and late Mr. B.G. Deshmukh sir to increase public participation and activism towards creating a more transparent and efficient governance system. In order to sensitize and mentor the youth in ethical values with an emphasis on good governance, PCGT started the Youth for Governance program in the year 2012. In furtherance to this vision and mission, PCGT has created a leadership opportunity for young college-going students in Mumbai and Pune through its Campus Ambassador program. Previously, PCGT has organized dialogues, workshops, and webinars as requested by the campus ambassadors on issues that are related to good governance and involving eminent speakers and role models in different fields to guide and inspire the youth. Now, we would like to brief you about our speakers who will be addressing us today. Tanmay?
Yeah, thank you. Our first speaker would be Mr. VP Raja sir. Sir is a trustee at PCGT and was an IS officer in the Maharashtra cadre. He has worked in various assignments at the district, state and center in recognition of his outstanding contributions to administrative reforms while working as a collector at Satara. As a transport commissioner of Maharashtra, Mr. Raja was awarded the Distinguished Government Administration Award. With the Government of India, he worked with the Ministry of Human Resource Development, the Planning Commission, the Ministry of Defense, and the Department of Atomic Energy in September 2000. He was also a part of the Appraisal Committee of the Ministry of Environment and Forest of Government of India. He was also the chairman of the Maharashtra Electricity Regulatory Commission for a period of 5 years.
Our second speaker will be Mr. MR Reddy sir. Sir is also a trustee at PCGT. A postgraduate in physics, Sir joined Indian Police Service in 1967 and was allotted to the Maharashtra cadre, where he worked in a number of districts, cities as Superintendent of Police, Deputy Commissioner of Police, handling law and order, crime, personnel management, and general administration. After a successful tenure in Maharashtra, he went on deputation to Government of India and served in the Intelligence Bureau in various capacities handling intelligence, industrial, VIP security and counter-terrorism. He went on deputation to Cabinet Secretariat to set up Special Protection Group for ensuring the protection of Prime Minister Atal Bihari Vajpayee and his family members. He headed Special Protection Group as director and successfully handled the visit of the Prime Minister to a number of foreign countries, including Pakistan, and a visit to Kargil during the active war with Pakistan. On completion of tenure, he was posted in Germany in the Indian Embassy as Minister handling international terrorism. He retired from IPS in 2004. He was awarded Indian Police Medal for Meritorious Service and President's Police Medal for distinguished service in recognition of his valuable public service. Before our speakers address us, I would request all the attendees to first mute your microphones, and it is recommended to keep your videos on. And if you have any questions for the speakers, please put them in the chat box. I would now like to welcome our first speaker, Mr. VP Raja sir. Sir, you have the
floor. Thank you very much for Tanmay and Dimple for your kind words of introduction, I'm grateful to the principal, the vice principal, and many of you students. I see the list of participants now as 145. Perhaps more may join. So all of you, each one of you, for kind of having a little chat with both of us. I noticed that both Mr. Reddy and myself, we have some things in common. Both of us are postgraduates in physics, and both of us are trustees of PCGT. Actually, just last week, I addressed another webinar, and the topic of the webinar was how the civil service is a dream career. So while preparing for that seminar, I was kind of wondering in my mind, what should I tell the young students? And then I myself started contemplating, or rather introspecting, on my years in civil service, including my post-retirement assignment as chairman MERC, and started introspecting what really is required of a civil servant. Then I answered myself, actually nothing much is required, in the sense you don't have to be a rocket scientist. You should be a very good listener. You should be able to listen and comprehend things, understand people. Yes, you are a generalist. There are experts who will advise you whenever you come across absolutely new technical subjects. But perhaps what is required is you should be a good human being. Basically, with a quality that we are here to do justice, that there is no really any difference between one human being and other human being in this world. You should be a real humanist. You must look at all human beings with a kind of innocence, and you can learn from them. So after this introspection, I also started kind of thinking about various readings that I had done in the last 40, 50 years about my jobs. And one thing that struck me was the thoughts of an outstanding international civil servant. His name is Dag Hammarskjöld. He was the second Secretary General of the United Nations. He became the second Secretary General sometime in 1953, and he had 2 terms, and he continued as Secretary General till his death in an air accident at Congo, where he had gone for peace negotiations sometime on 17th or 18th of September 1961. He had kept a diary, which was called as Markings, which was published after his death, posthumously, which actually brought out his thoughts, not about civil service or the job that he was doing, but the kind of thinking that used to occur in his mind when he was in various assignments. It was more or less a daily diary, but not necessarily kept every day. Whenever he felt like, he wrote, and these are now available, in a book form called Markings or Waymarks. But he addressed a radio program in 1953, which summarizes the influence his upbringing and his parents had on his worldview of how one should be. And I'm going to start by reading that. Quote, I'm quoting Dag Hammarskjöld, as he says in a radio program in 1953. From generations of soldiers and government officials on my father's side, I inherited a belief that no life was more satisfactory than one of selfless service to your country or humanity. This service required a sacrifice of all personal interests, but likewise the courage to stand up unflinchingly for your convictions. From scholars and clergymen on my mother's side, I inherited a belief that in the very radical sense of the Gospels, all men and women were equals as children of God and should be met and treated by us as our masters in God. Till now, I have not found a better statement of what I can call as the attitude of mind that you need to have if you want to be a really successful civil servant. And if this is there in your mind all the time, you really will do only justice. You will not get pressurized. You will not get blown like a football by what can be called as the spirit of the times, or the petty controversies that take place on a day-to-day basis. Because your feet are firmly on the ground. Like a wind, the current debates on various things kind of, you hear them, you see them, but it doesn't really impact you in a terrible way because your feet are firmly on the ground. And the thought is a much larger vision. Then if you ask, what is it that is expected of civil servants, or how can we achieve that kind of equanimity while we do our work, so to say, that is what is summarized in the tagline of the PCGT. If you see public concern for governance trust, promoting honesty, transparency, and accountability in governance. Honesty, transparency, and accountability. If you can provide all these three yourself without somebody demanding it, that's the ideal. And I like to tell you that this is possible by giving a few examples. More of it will become storytelling, but they're true stories from my own career. I was collector in the district of Satara for about 2 years and 8 months during the years 1980, 81, and 82. At that time, 2 medium irrigation projects were under implementation in Satara. You know, whenever there are things called major irrigation projects, medium irrigation projects, major irrigation projects are things like Bakranangal or Tehri Dam in Uttar Pradesh. In Maharashtra also, we had one very early, the so-called Koyna Dam. But in the districts of Satara, when I was collector, 2 medium irrigation projects, one called the Dome project and another called the Kaner project, were under implementation. Now, what do these irrigation projects involve? The concept is very simple. There is a river or a water flow or a tributary of a river, you dam it. You put a dam there, construct a dam. Then it will lead to storage of water. the storage will be quite substantial. When you store that much of water, a number of villages will go under submergence, which means whatever originally villages where human beings were living will now get submerged under the reservoir of water which will come up when the dam is completed. Then you take two canals, typically called the right bank canal and the left bank canal, from that reservoir, and those canals will then bifurcate into what are called as majors, minors, sub-minors, and finally irrigate a lot of land. That's what an irrigation project is all about. But what happens is, number one, a number of villages will go into submergence. So what happens to those villages? What happens to the human beings in those villages? They will need to be resettled. You have to build absolutely new villages and resettle them. Then what happens to the people in the canal? Some amount of resettlement will be required there. But there will also be people who will benefit because of that water. So there is a benefited zone where people who get land in the benefited zone will be very happy because what was previously dry will now have perennial irrigation. So we also used to acquire land in the benefited zone, because in any such project, there are gainers and losers. And the entire idea of making a project is to identify the gainers, identify the losers, acquire some land from the gainers, and distribute it to the losers also. This is for the losers in the project, you give them land in the benefited zone. So, but suppose I'm not a project person, but I'm one of the project affected persons, how will I feel? I'm perhaps 45 years of age with my children. I've been living a life in a certain fashion, and suddenly I'm told that my village is going to go under submergence. Of course, government pays what is called land acquisition cost and all this. So I had a big office under the collector called the District Resettlement Office. So when I took over as collector Satara, within the first month itself, I realized I always had an open office. Open office means there was a time when anybody could come and see me, not as a crowd, one by one. And I had a discipline. I will never leave office without leaving every visitor who is waiting to see me. Some visitors will come with prior appointments. Many will come without appointment. But I had a time, let's say 3 to 5 in the afternoon for visitors. But often I used to sit till 8:30 in the night so that every visitor has an opportunity to come and tell what is the problem. Within a month or two, I realized that almost 85% of the visitors I had in those first few months were project affected persons, were persons who are getting impacted by the Kaner or Dome projects, and the land is going to go away or the house is going to go away. They don't know how much money they will get. So after realizing this in a month, then I told my personal secretary, before they meet me, you make a tabular form. Who is the person who is meeting me, from which village, and when he is waiting to see me, do a little interview, what really is his problem, not in great detail, so that later we can do an analysis of it. And in about 3 months, this is what today we call as data analytics. While what I was doing in 1980 was a certain kind of subjective analysis. What is the nature of projects? Then I found that we did that analysis with about 3 months of data. I was also continuously doing it on a daily basis. People had problems of how much money I will get for the land which I lose. People had problems about how come that so-and-so got a better land in the benefited area and I did not get as good a land as his? No two lands in the benefited zone will be identical. Tailenders are always afraid that the water may never come to them, actually. So there is always something better than the other. So I had made a list of about 12 items, which was the common problems of people. Then I told my office, my deputy collectors and tahsildars, I allotted subjects to them, depending on the knowledge of who is good at what, and said that I want you to prepare a 10 or 12-page write-up in Marathi. Now, Marathi I had learned after joining service, but Marathi is not my mother tongue. And I said, you prepare it, and then you give it to me. I will read it, and I should be able to understand it. I'm not an expert in Marathi, but the test is I should be able to understand it. So I used to do, they will prepare, one of the Aval Karkuns or Tahsildars or Deputy Collector will prepare. For example, the subjects I still remember was, one is how to calculate your land acquisition value if you have lost land. You can do the calculation yourself. What is benefited zone? And what is the formula for giving land in the benefited zone? In the new village where you'll be resettled, what are the facilities which will be given to you? What are the facilities which will be given even if your old village didn't have it? How the temple, the mosque in your village is going to be remade in the new resettled village, which will be ready before you're shifted there. The new village will be ready, you'll be taken there, and you can see the mosque temple. When everything is ready, you can bring the old idols, wherever there is a Hindu temple, you can shift it and do the puja yourself. So everything planned. On all these things, I had booklets on 12 subjects written like this. Then my staff used to write it. I used to read it 2-3 times. Then even though I was not an expert in Marathi, I used to encircle some words and say, "ये थोड़ा अवघड दिसतात. ये शब्द आणखीन काहीतरी वापरा. नाहीतर ये जे वाक्य आहेत, ये काही व्यवस्थित दिसत नाही. आणखीन काही सोपं भाषा वापरा." Like that, orally I used to give suggestions, and these booklets, drafts, used to go through 2 or 3 iterations till I am satisfied. Then I used to get them printed. I used to get 20,000, 30,000 copies printed, and said that it should be given to every project affected person. Then the question is, not everybody is literate. So how to ensure about the illiterate people? I made it mandatory that the books should be read in the village chowdis, because in villages, people have a custom of, going around in the chowdi and sitting in the evening before sunset. So I said, people should read it out, because even if people are not literate, they can understand oral Marathi. And in all these booklets, like for example, the booklet on how to calculate your land acquisition value, at the last page in bold prints, I used to say, if the value which you actually receive is plus minus 15% of the value which you have calculated using this booklet, you're free to directly come to the collector. And the collector's address is this, collector's telephone number is this. Now, this is a method of ensuring that people in the line, there is no mischief. I said, if your value as you calculate yourself, or you get it calculated by somebody in the village, is plus minus 15%, you can directly call the collector and you will get an appointment to see him. I'm mentioning this in detail because this, what I just now described, gave me a very important lesson in the year 1980, which I have continuously used throughout my civil service, including when I was chairman MERC, and I continue to use it today. What is that? When people meet you with problems, try your best to solve that problem. But over and above that, ask a question, is this a symptom of a larger problem? And do something to solve that larger problem. My preparing these booklets was an attempt to solve the larger problem. And lo and behold, after a year of this exercise, as I said, at the first 2 months, when 85% of my visitors were project affected persons, a year after that, the project is still going on. It's a long-term project. But the number of visitors with these kinds of complaints from 85% came down to about 20%. Visitors wanting clarifications. So I'm repeating a lesson which I learned, not from any textbooks, not from my academy at Missouri, which teaches IAS people under training. No, I learned it from this actual experience, that whenever people come with a problem, A, please listen to them carefully without interrupting. And then solve the problem to the best of your ability. You won't be able to solve every problem. But always ask the question, is this a symptom of a larger disease? And do something to solve the larger disease. In this context, I must tell you something else. Same, when I was Collector Satara, was Mr. Yashwantrao Chavan. He was from Karad, which is one of the talukas in Satara. So he used to visit, as Deputy Prime Minister, he used to visit Karad, his hometown, at least once a month, sometimes twice a month. And as collector, since he was Deputy Prime Minister, and he used to come for what is called a personal visit. It's not completely official visit. However, collector has protocol work, so I had to go meet him in Karad. And whenever he came to Karad, there were visitors who wanted to come. So I used to sit with him because he used to request me to sit with him. So in his, either in the Karad circuit house or sometimes in his house in Karad, I used to sit. And I was only silent. Literally hundreds of visitors will meet him. Police will be there outside to ensure a line and queue. And he will listen. Some papers he'll keep with himself. They'll normally come up, bring a petition also. And a few papers, he used to give it to me after initialing. So once after such an event, and he used to come often, so I used to meet him quite often during the years when he was Deputy Prime Minister. So once I asked him, sir, how do you listen to so many people at such a short time and keep a very smiling face? He used to reply just 1-2 sentences or ask a leading question in between. So he hardly used to converse. He only used to listen. Then I still remember what Mr. Yashwantrao Chavan told me when I was alone with him, perhaps in the circuit house. He said, Raja, some of these problems you'll be able to solve. Some I'll be able to take back to Delhi and try to do something on it over a period of time. But the fact that I have listened to them, and he also told me, whenever you heard me speak, after they have told me something for 5 minutes, all that I have done is summarized in 1 or 2 sentences what they have told me, so that they feel very happy. Saibana Kalla. He has understood my problem. He said, the moment a human being feels that I have understood his problem, 80% of his problem is solved. Somebody responsible has heard me, had the time to listen to me. This again is something which I learned in my tenure as Collector Satara. And it is not an artificial empathy or an artificial compassion. It comes from the heart. It comes from the heart. Mr. Y.P. Chavan had that quality. I was surprised when I asked him this question. This is what he said. This again, something which I always, you learn by coming in touch with great people. Now let me give you a few more examples. Again, when I was Collector Satara, I had to organize the 11th Inter-District Mahila Krida Spardha. At that time when I was collector, I think there were about 25 districts in Maharashtra. I don't remember. Now there are more. So players, women players, girls will come from all these districts, and number of games, the normal runs will be there, the so-called athletics, long jump and short jump and shot put, kabaddi. There were about 12, 13 games, 14 games. And every year, this used to be held in one district by rotation. So when I was collector, it was the turn of Satara to host this. I still remember it was the 11th Akhil Maharashtra Mahila Krida, Inter-District Mahila Krida Spardha. Now that means normally teams of about 30, 40 people will come from every district. So easily, and the managers and some staff members, etc. So it will turn out to be about 40, about 1,000 people. They will stay there for about 10 days. So you have to make arrangements for their accommodation, arrangement for the meals. You have to organize the games, all on Olympic standards. There will be an opening ceremony. Then these games at various stadia, not everywhere, everything in the main stadia. Then a closing ceremony. So for all this, every district is a small office called the District Sports Council and the District Sports Officer. That's a very small office with just one District Sports Officer and one PA and one clerk to assist him. So it's an office of one District Sports Officer and 2 persons with very limited budget. So when you have to conduct this kind of games, you have to ask for donations. So when I talked about PCGT's tagline, promoting honesty, transparency. Transparency is required everywhere, but it is required 1,000,000 times when it comes to money matters. So as a collector, you make an appeal. You open an account for the 11th Mahila Krida Spardha account in the local bank. Donations come from various people. Now, at that time, we didn't have computers like we have today. Nothing digital, everything was manual. But this was sometime in 1981. I had said that every evening, all the money that came in with the person who has given that money, with his name and the amount he has donated, should be put on the notice board of the collector's office and the District Sports Council office. A special notice board was made only on money received by the District Sports Council special account for Krida Spardha. Preparation started almost a month before this. So at the beginning, it is mostly donations. Then a time will come when expenditure will also take place. Same. And this is not a weekly basis or something, daily basis. The same night, by 10 p.m. in the night, it should all be put. A copy to be given to the collector, a copy to be given to the district sports officer, and a copy to go to the notice board, special notice board on this in the collector's office and the special notice board in the district sports office. So when there were no computers, etc. That is transparency. Today we are having a lot of issues because in money matters, if you are not transparent, a needle of suspicion always comes of what's happening to the money. The kind of needle of suspicion that today exists with, let us say, electoral bonds or with PM Care Fund. Now, under the RTI Act, without anybody asking for it, why should even people ask for an audit? Audit is a different issue. Every day, under Section 4 of the Right to Information Act, it should be put up. PM Care accounts. These are the people from whom we have received money. This is the amount received. When you don't do that, a needle of suspicion and the standard of transparency comes down. Of course, for this Krida Spardha, perhaps totally we might have collected about, in those days, 1980, perhaps 18 or 20 lakhs, and perhaps spent about 15, 16 lakhs. After the games were over, settled the accounts, and then close that account and transfer the balance to the account of the District Sports Council, and announce that also with the ledgers. So in money matters, every paise has to be accounted for. Who has given the money? How it was spent. For meals, so much. For trophies, this much. And if somebody wants to see the what was spent on a simple trophy, yes. And these were days when RTI didn't exist. Right to information, etc. came much, much later. What was one of the reasons why the Congress government was voted out of power in the year, the previous 2014? Various corruption scams, one of which was the Commonwealth Games. In terms of organizational ability, there isn't too much difference between Commonwealth Games and the Mahila Krida Spardha in the district. It's one and the same. Except if toilet papers, toilet rolls which cost 30 rupees are billed at 3,000 rupees. There is a problem. So according to me, the Congress lost the elections in 2014 on these huge corruption scams of the Commonwealth Games, of coal, of 2G. Some were perhaps not true, but it was made out. But let's not be under the mistaken belief that corruption has disappeared today. If I were the Prime Minister, I will account for every pie received under the PM Care Fund today and say, this is how I spent it. And these are the people who have given the money, and these are the people to whom I have provided the money for such and such purpose. So governance, whether in a small organization, a big organization, the entire state or country, same principles. And that is why and normally these are easy principles to follow. How come these principles often get compromised? They get compromised because of not following what Dag Hammarskjöld said. This service requires a sacrifice of all personal interests. The moment your power and personal interest comes in, you're doomed. And that's what leads to bad governance. Each and every instance of bad governance can be attributed to some personal interest, some temptation. Let me give one more example. I was Transport Commissioner of Maharashtra for a period of almost 4 years and 4 months, the longest tenure that I ever had in the state government. At that time, there were limits on what are called as national permits. There's truckers that you see bringing goods from various parts. So that was based on a quota system. Like Maharashtra used to be given a quota of, I don't now remember the number. Let us say Maharashtra can give 5,000 national truck permits, which means 5,000 truckers can get permits to take the truck anywhere from Kanyakumari to Kashmir, or from Gujarat to West Bengal on a permit. Like that, every state had been given a quota by the center. So we had to distribute 5,000 national permits. This job was given to the State Transport Authority, of which I was the secretary, a senior secretary of the government. In fact, the Home Secretary of the government of Maharashtra was the chairman. So the State Transport Authority created a committee with me as the chairman of that committee and a few people, some of whom were non-officials. Some MLA, some other persons, about 5 of us in the committee. And then some broad decisions were taken that when we give these 5,000 permits, we must ensure that it's given in the same proportion as the number of truck owners in every division of Maharashtra. That is, you have this so-called Konkan division, Pune division, Nasik division, Aurangabad division, Amravati division. At that time, Amravati division was not there. Entire Nagpur division, what is now Amravati. And so a decision was taken at the State Transport Authority level that this will be the distribution of the 5,000 permits, that it should be given to. So again, this question came, because this is an issue where supply, the number of permits that can be given is limited to 5,000. Demand is very high. Applications were invited. These days we have Google Form. Those days everything had to be done manually, no Google Forms. Giving how long, what kind of a truck he has, what is this, he has been in business for how many years, etc., etc. And for 5,000 permits, we would have got easily about 50,000 applications. I took a few decisions as Transport Commissioner. One was, we will have meetings in each of the divisional headquarters. One in Mumbai. Actually, we did it in Navi Mumbai because there had better space. We used Sidco Bhavan. One in Pune, one in Nagpur, one in Aurangabad. Like that, division-wise, we said we'll have meetings. Second decision I took was, same, coming from my experience of the Krida Spardha kind of thing. I said, we will hire a big hall. All applicants should be called to that hall and called for a short interview. The 5 members of the committee, including the Transport Commissioner, will sit on the stage. And there'll be somebody calling out on the mic. One by one, they'll come. We'll ask a few questions. Just behind the stage, we will have a small kind of green room where whenever we want to have a recess of half an hour for lunch or tea, etc., the members go into recess. And the green room also has the facilities of an attached bathroom. But I told the members, that is working out the strategy, that we must announce the results the same day. To interview all those people may take time from 10 in the morning till 6 in the evening. But again, we should put up the results in the same hall and announce it before we disperse, irrespective of whether it becomes 8 p.m. or 9 p.m. or 10 p.m. Everybody agrees. The moment you have a system which is reasonable, even a person with a self-interest is not able to say, no, 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 don't do that. A person who has self-interest always wants secrecy. He doesn't want transparency. And this I was able to, I won't say push through. There was no objection. Yeah, good idea. Only the Sahib aple staff chief pushkal, tras honar. I said we have conducted elections, etc., where people used to count ballot papers, not these EVMs, and stay up the whole night. So Tyachi Kalji Karuna Kapan. We'll manage that. And we distributed 5,000 national permits in that fashion. Transparency. There's nothing, no rocket science in this system. The point is, whatever you're doing in the presence of everybody. You're ensuring that nobody can contact you by phone, etc. Luckily, mobiles didn't exist in those days. So I told my office, no telephone to be kept around. And no member or anybody in the committee, including the transport commissioner, should be called, sir, CM is calling you. Or something. If somebody calls you, say that he is busy in a meeting, he will call back when he's free. So looking back, it was nothing but transparency. Transparency brings me to another issue with which I'm not involved. You know, there was a milk revolution in India. We call it as Operation Flood, or the so-called White Revolution. It started with Amul Dairy, cooperative dairy in Gujarat, at a place called Anand. It was a cooperative dairy. The leaders were all political people. But the so-called chief executive was this gentleman called Vaze, who was a dairy technologist. And he was certainly responsible for the White Revolution in entire India. The so-called Gujarat model was replicated. The Amul model was replicated. So what he did was, he formed what are called as spearhead groups. Milk is actually collected from villages. Then you have to chill it. So you have to keep ice packs, etc. Bring it to your nearest chilling center where it is chilled even more. Then brought to a pasteurization center, which will be at consumption points. That is Pune, Mumbai, wherever there is huge consumption. So you need ice. You need collection centers where milk is collected and brought in ice boxes. Then it has to go to chilling centers. Then from chilling centers, it has to be taken to pasteurization centers. It's a big cold chain. I won't go into the details of how it was built up. That's a big story in itself. But the starting point is milk collection in every village. Milk basically contains two things. One is called fat, F-A-T, fat. Another is called SNP, solid non-fat, which is milk protein. So the quality of the milk depends on fat and SNF. There is a very, very simple instrument called a lactometer for measuring the fat content in milk. So what did Vaze do? Vaze said, under the cost of Operation Flood, give a lactometer to every lady who is going to give milk in the morning in the collection center. The staff of the collection center will have lactometers. But normally it is the ladies who milk the cow, bring it, and it will be measured in front of them, and payment is made immediately in cash on a daily basis. And the amount of payment depends on this lactometer readings, depending on how much fat is there in the milk, etc. So two instructions of Dr. Vaze. Give a lactometer free of cost to every lady. Whenever there is a difference in reading between the lactometer reading of the person collecting the milk from the dairy society and the lady giving the milk, she should be paid immediately as per her reading. And take small samples of that milk, which we later analyze in the lab next day or over days. Then after analyzing the sample, if we find that there are some calibration issues, we will bring the lady at our cost and calibrate the lactometer in her presence. But we will not recover that excess payment she has made for one day. What is this? This trust. Transparency involves building trust. Automatically, Koreans' ground staff he was able to control through these ladies by simply giving them a lactometer, which costs very little. So the advantages that you get from transparency is immense. There is no possibility of people adding water to that milk or adding caustic soda or adding some badam, or badam is too costly, something else to fatten it further. All these gadabad which people think of disappears when you're able to create a system which ensures transparency. So while we talk of all this transparency, we should also be aware that unfortunately, human nature has a bit of mischief in it. All of you would have heard of that story of a king who wanted to check the honesty of all his subjects. So he had an empty tank in his palace, and on Amavasya day, he said everybody should come and pour a glass of milk. Next day, it was full of water, because everybody thought when others are pouring milk, if I pour water, I'll go unnoticed. This is the weakness in human nature. So to overcome the weakness, it is necessary to create systems so that, trust is created. I can keep on talking, but I think I will stop at this point, and perhaps at a later time, after you hear Mr. Reddy at question answer time, I'll be delighted to answer any questions. So over to Mr. Reddy.
Thank you so much, sir. Now I would request our next speaker, Mr. M.R. Reddy, sir, to take the floor.
Well, my dear young friends, Mr. Raja, while explaining the specific cases, what he has done, the qualities which a civil servant should have, he has highlighted. What I would like to do is that from the time of independence, our country getting independence till now, the role played by the political leadership and the civil servant in achieving some of the most difficult things which this country has faced. From that, you will understand the role of the civil servant in good governance. That is in 1947. Of course, all of you were not born at that time. But it is good to know history how the country has evolved over a period of time and who has contributed for this growth. At the time of independence, the situation in the country was that there were 550 principalities where the Rajas, they were ruling. India was not one at that time. There were 550 principalities where the British government had offered to them either they can opt to stay in India or they can opt to stay in Pakistan, go to Pakistan, or they also can declare to be independent. Imagine if these 550 principalities decide like that, we would never have this country like this, India, which is actually a subcontinent, huge country. We would never have got that. At that time, poverty was rampant. Every time, the people used to suffer from famines. Lakhs of people used to die. But the foreign government which was ruling, they were not concerned about the Indian human lives. So there is enormous suffering. Then, question of partition. The country was partitioned into two, India and Pakistan. there was misery throughout both the sides. People were killed. They were killed in lakhs. Families, they are separated. Whatever earnings they had, property they had to leave and go as without anything, just for survival. They have to go. That was another problem at that time. Health of the people was so poor. The average life period of the thing was around 38 years. That was the average life period of the people in India. The literacy, single digits literacy, this is broadly the conditions in which we got independence, and the visionary leadership of the political leaders, and the professionalism and the commitment of the civil servants together, they could solve these problems. Now, what is the condition at present, which you are witnessing now? You are witnessing a single country, India as a whole. You are witnessing a constitution, the result of the constitution, where we have central government, federal government, some powers are delegated to the states, some powers are with the center. We have concurrent thing with the both state and this thing. And because of the constitution which we got, now we could remain as a united country with so many different castes, different races, and different communities. Now, many other countries surrounding us, you can see, there is no democracy there. India now is the largest democracy in the world. Every sixth person in the world is an Indian. Now, imagine with such huge population, such huge country, governance also has a lot of problems. But they could overcome that. Take the case of now, I will mention 3-4 cases which you will realize that the political leadership and the civil servant working together, they can produce outstanding results. They are complementary. Take the case of these 550 principalities, which are to be voluntarily merged with India. Naturally, they are not going to, those people who have these powers, those kings, they are not going to agree for merger voluntarily. At that time, the Union Home Minister and the Deputy Prime Minister was Vallabhbhai Patel. He took the leadership. Of course, the decisions were from the cabinet, but the leadership of this particular issue was with Vallabhbhai Patel. He was ably assisted by a civil servant who is a VP Menon. VP Menon, he joined the government service when British rule was there as a stenographer. Now, a person who joined this service as a stenographer, he rose to the level of Secretary to Government of India, and he was the principal confidant of Vallabhbhai Patel in handling various kings, various rulers. He used to be in touch with them. He, in some cases, cajoled them. In some cases, of course, put some pressure, all that. Now, Home Minister had the full trust in him, and he has helped Home Minister to achieve this miracle of uniting 550 principalities as a one country. Now, what are the qualities VP Menon had? See, he had the knowledge. When he was given the duty, he studied the background of all these principalities. He studied what are the strengths and weaknesses of the existing rulers, what are the temptations they have. In some cases, of course, rulers are genuinely thing they wanted to join in India, but in majority of the cases, they expected something in return if they give yes. All this he did. So he had the knowledge. Secondly, he was honest. He has no personal agenda. And his only commitment was commitment to the country. So because of these qualities, the political leadership had full trust in him. And together, they achieved this miracle. Now, India is the largest democracy, functioning democracy. After we got independence, a constitution was to be prepared and it was to be adopted. The constitution which we have now was adopted by the government in 1950, January 26, 1950, which we celebrated as Republic Day. There again, the Constituent Assembly, which was the one who finally given approval for the Constitution, the visionary leadership of those people. But along with that, the support extended by a civilian who was the Dr. Lakshman Swami Iyengar. He was given the task of preparing the draft of the Constitution. He studied the major constitutions in the world, and he studied what are the strengths and weaknesses of those things. And a country of this size, and with so many different races, different castes, different religions, if they have to be ruled by, they have to be provided a good governance, what should be the constitution? What should it contain? And how will that these things will help this country to develop harmoniously? So he was the one who drafted. Now, before drafting, he went through the major constitutions in the world, and he had no personal agenda. It was decided to think, after adopting the constitution, India became a democratic republic. So if it has to be a democracy, if the powers are to be shared between the center and state as a federal system, he was the one who prepared the draft, of course, in consultation with political leadership, in consultation with other people. And this stood the ground in solving the problems which the country was facing at that time. The country which was separated, that is Pakistan, now they have completely, they changed their constitution. They have brought in two different occasions, new constitution, because they were not sure what should be the future of that country, in the sense that what do we want? Now, we wanted democracy, we wanted federal governance system. Finally, Pakistan chose to become an Islamic nation. And what an Islamic nation wants from the people, a constitution was amended, constitution was annulled, new constitution was brought. I'm just giving an example, not to criticize the other country, but difference in thing. Now here, the role played by Alladi Lakshman Swami Iyer was such a significant one that he could visualize, he could put it in the framework, and he was also the constitutional advisor to Viceroy. He was an Indian, whereas Viceroy was a Britisher. He was a constitutional advisor. So what is it that has helped? You could do all that. How could you do same? That he was honest, he had the deep knowledge on the issue, he had no personal agenda. Only thing is interest of the country. Now the remaining, another issue which I mentioned was the poverty, where people used to die in lakhs. You would not be imagining what suffering our forefathers had through famines, nothing to eat, nothing to days together. And even in that poverty, when the people are suffering from famine, the foreign rulers were insisting that they should pay the revenue, land revenue and other revenues. And if they couldn't pay, they were subjected to hardships, including torture. So much so, even the foreign government realized that, which is highly thing, so they had to appoint a committee. The committee was known as Torture Commission, because that is what they study, how people are being tortured. You young people now, you can't imagine that side of poverty, that side of suffering which the people, our forefathers had. Now you are enjoying, or we are enjoying, the fruits of a democratic country with liberty, freedom of speech. We have fundamental rights. And that is one, the political leadership and the civil servant working together, how they could take the case of agriculture, that agricultural revolution. It was also done by Dr. Swaminathan, who was a scientist. He was to a country which was facing poverty every year. That has gone. Now country is people have enough to eat, and our country exports to those countries who need these products. So in these 70 years, about 70 years, our country achieved that. We have become agricultural surplus. Through white revolution, we have become, it's the second largest milk producing country in the world. This over a period of time. Here once again, that cooperative movement of the people, and ably supported by Dr. Kurian. That is what we could achieve. They gave the initial momentum. So these are the examples. There are so many other examples. These are the examples because of the time I wanted to mention. From that, you can see what should be the qualities of a civil servant so that he could provide good governance to the country. Our first Home Minister was also Deputy Prime Minister, Patel, Vallabhbhai Patel. He said that the governments come, governments go, but the governance continues with the support of the civil servant. What he means is, government means elected governments. They come there for a period of 5 years, and next, either they may come back or someone else will come. But the government consists of that type of knowledge, which has over a period of time, 35, 40 years service, a period of time, they get the knowledge on various aspects, on various subjects. They get it. But politically, they do not have thorough knowledge of various things. So the knowledge was the major problem. And of course, governing principles, that is another thing. They're not trained, that they don't. I think now they, am I audible now? Okay. So
yes, sir.
This is where the civil servant used to support the elected government. So the continuity and the progressive way the country progresses, but in that the civil servants play a very great role. That's what when Home Minister said that governments come, government go, but the governance continues with the support of the civil servants. So this is a very crucial role a civil servant plays. And as we discussed, these civil servants should have certain essential qualities if they have to provide good governance. And those essential qualities are, which Mr. Raja has highlighted, which I mentioned now. To sum it up, that the knowledge they should be a thorough professional, he should have the knowledge, he should be honest, he should have no personal agenda. The only agenda is, only their Gita is our constitution. You follow the constitution. By doing it, and then the most important thing for a civil servant is empathy. Empathy is that it is a capability of a person either to understand or to feel what others are experiencing. So when you will sit with certain powers, certain things where you can help, when people come with problems, it is not that you just listen to the problems, you just try to do in a mechanical way, but you should have the quality of trying to analyze or understand and appreciate what that person was experiencing. If the civil servant has that empathy, he will invariably be helping people. He will be doing good to the society. He will be doing good to the country because he understands the problems. He understands what people are going through, and he will come with solutions because of his knowledge and various things. He will try to help that. This of empathy is very, very important for civil servant. These are the qualities which our the civil servants of that time and the political leadership at that time, they exhibited, and we are the beneficiaries of good governance. Good governance in simple thing is what is that it should be honest. What you are providing governance should be honest. It should be transparent. There is nothing to hide, especially in democracy. The government is for the sake of people, so it should be transparent. And both civil servant and the political leadership are accountable for what they do. If this is all the good governance is, while highlighting what civil servants and political leadership had done in the past and how the country has progressed, it is also necessary for us to know what is the situation now. Unfortunately, the situation is different. I don't say that it is completely different because large number of civil servants even now, they have all these qualities. But unfortunately, what we have to say is that they act more as mercenaries rather than as committed civil servants. Mercenaries, what? That for the sake of money, you do what is what the others want you to do because you regularly get the salary, you regularly get the promotion, you regularly, maybe you want to go where nice places are there, you manage to go. All this is, so in return to that, what you do, whatever the political leadership asks you to do, you do. It's not that political leadership always asks you to do wrong things, no. They always want the civil servant should do what is right. But yes, there are few cases where unreasonable demands are put. When the civil servant explains what the thing is, when he does not do those things, that is his contribution, civil servant's contribution for good governance. Yes, sometimes they do suffer, but quite often nothing happens because political leadership are aware that civil servants have certain limitations. But if take the case, you might be reading in the newspaper, a very honest, upright officer, but he is transferred, I think, 30 times over in 30 years, or maybe 30 times he was transferred in a period of 15 years. Now, that is, yes, he's individually honest, he's individually very transparent, he wants to provide good governance, but he will not be in a position to achieve anything. He will not be in a position to contribute anything to the system, because you are not there at one place to study and to do the thing what is needed by those people, because of your individual officer's behavior is such that every now and then he gets transferred. Whereas a civil servant who has the larger vision, what he does is that he doesn't have to fight with politicians or fight with everything, but by doing right things, by explaining that to the political system, political thing, he will be allowed at least to stay at one place 2 to 3 years where he can contribute. So, accommodative nature of the civil servant up to a point is very, very necessary for a democratic country to progress. So, but when the officer becomes corrupt, when the officer is not transparent, when he has his own personal interests, he or she will not be in a position to provide good governance. So it is necessary, the young people like you, what is good to know what is good governance and what role the civil servant plays and what role the civil servant should not play. If at this stage, if you understand, maybe when you get into the civil service, it's not necessary that you should have these qualities only to be a civil servant. No, this is what you should have in any profession you take, in any thing you do. These are the qualities which are needed for you to prosper, and in the process, for the society to prosper and the country to prosper. So broadly, I just wanted to tell that by giving examples, what qualities one should have. And as you know, PCGT is the one which works with the students, college students, and school children. And what actually the PCGT aims is impart values to the children, to the college students, good values, ethical values in life. And the program which you are having, and as the motto PCGT has, promote honesty, transparency, and accountability. That is the one which gives good governance. And both civil servant and citizen, as a citizen also, all of us have a role in following those values and following these things, both for professional advancement, in the advancement in life, and these things will help you. Thank you. And if you have questions, perhaps you can ask to any of us. We would be in a position to share with you. So you understand that what good governance is and what a civil servant can do in furtherance of good governance. Thank you.
Now we would request the participants to put the questions in the chat box and they will be recognized.
Yes, we have some questions here. Yeah. We have a question. What if there are clashes between elected government civil servants over an opinion, and after so many discussions also, there wouldn't be a way to solve it? How to overcome this situation?
Well, in my almost 40 years of working as a civil servant and having worked along with a large number of elected governments and politicians, normally, like typically, when I used to work with a minister, right in the first or second interaction, obviously when we are alone with each other, I used to say, sir, there will be situations when there are differences of opinion. Then I will try my best to convince you. You can also try your best to convince me. There will be situations when the minister is able to convince you as to why his method of action is the more appropriate. And there are many occasions when ministers do change their views based on your advice. So I will say 99% of the cases, clashes don't take place. You have to work together. Of course, what gets highlighted in the media or also Mr. Reddy talked about an officer getting transferred 30 times. These things happen because of bad interpersonal relationship. If a politician or your political boss has a certain view, you can't attribute motives to him. It is the use of language. As long as there is a mutual trust, you can always agree to disagree. You can agree to disagree. In my 40 years, yes, there were only 2 occasions when what was put in the chat box that is completely irreconcilable. The minister wants something, you have argued, you have heard him, no, you feel you can't do that. Then the so-called still higher ups take over, which means in case of a civil servant, if you're in Delhi, you kind of inform the cabinet secretary about what is happening. And if you're in the state, you inform the chief secretary. Similarly, the minister goes to the chief minister. And they don't necessarily find a way out. The way out is they give you a new assignment without any bad blood. So in my 40 years, on 2 occasions, yes, I got transferred, but after taking me into confidence, after the chief secretary and the chief minister saying, I think considering the issues, best is, let's give him a new officer and we'll put you there, not as a punishment. So yes, there will be, but even then, like I remember on one such occasion, the minister with whom I completely disagreed and said, sorry, I'm not able to do this because I have taken an oath to the Constitution. And sir, you too have taken an oath to the Constitution. Anyhow, he had his own pressures for that, which I also knew. But the beauty is, I was transferred out. A few days after that, he came to my room in my new job and said, Raja Saab, I wanted to have a cup of coffee with you. The idea was to make it clear that nothing personal in this. I have some compulsions as a politician. You have some compulsions as a civil surgeon, as a civil servant. We understand each other. That's it. But you can't, so the Lakshman Rekha you have to draw yourself. My Lakshman Rekha was very simple. I won't do anything which is unconstitutional. You see, this entire issue is regarding ends. They're political objectives. The elected government is free to decide what ends they want to achieve. But the means that are permissible to attain that end is only what is permissible under the Constitution. You can't use, that is what is called the framework of law. You can interpret law up to a point, but you can't break law. You can't break the Constitution because that is dangerous. that will make people lose trust in the system of governance. And a civil servant should also, and in most cases, ministers understand that. But you should never attribute motives. You should not call names, either in his front or whispers do get carried. You should not come out and tell your friends, what does this man know? All these things, keep your mouth shut. It is loose talk which leads to problems.
I just would like to add one thing. I was seeing in chat box what feedback we are getting. Most of the students, they are raising the thing about political interference. Civil servant is compelled to follow, and then how is it possible to work with these compelled things? Number of questions are there on that. I just wanted to mention that the situation is not that bad. It's not that civil servant and political leadership, they are continuously quarreling. No, but of course the media highlights quite often, and the others. So you need not carry that impression that there are a lot of pressure on the civil servants, and civil servants are unable to do what is right. That's not correct. That it is just like this, that you have a glass, it is full half, whereas the remaining half is vacant. You look at it, and a person with positive attitude will see the glass half full. The person who does not have that positive attitude, he will say that glass is half empty. The same is the case with the thing, especially for civil servants who have to contribute to the government, that don't look at the negative aspect all the time. The civil servant has to be positive oriented. Problems will be there, inadequacies are there, nothing is perfect. But a person, a civil servant who has a positive attitude, he will not think that it is a political pressure coming. He will think that it is the need of that political leader, maybe in a democratic system. When he understands that, he also puts it in a way to convince him. And very few cases where thing is there, but the way the feedback is saying, everyone is saying that too much of political pressure. Civil servants are being subjected to a lot of pressures. No, they are not subjected to. It's not all that bad, but yes, they are there. And civil servants should be mature enough to handle it. Otherwise, if really things were that bad, the country would not have progressed. You can see what, when we discussed in the period of 70 years, what country has progressed. And it would not have happened if really that there are daily quarrels between political leadership and civil servant. No, that's not the case. Generally, it is harmonious. Generally, both want to do good things. But there are cases, so don't go with the impression that there's too much of political pressure and civil servant is unable to do what is right. That's not correct.
I see a few more questions on the chat box. One is about what is good governance and what is ethical governance. You see, good governance is following the law. There are laws on everything. The mother of all laws is the Indian Constitution. Then there is Article 13(2) of the Constitution, which says that even Parliament or state legislatures can't make laws which takes away or abridges any of the fundamental rights given in Part 3 of the Constitution. So you have laws, you have procedural laws, substantive laws. Under laws, your rules, then your bylaws, then your notifications. That is the framework of law. Now, good governance means you have to be within the framework of law. Ethics is still a higher concept. What is legal may not be ethical. At a philosophical level, Humanism is an ethical concept. Nationalism is a legal concept. There's no difference between a human being, whether depending on the origin of birth or the country to which you belong. You're human beings. Those who are interested in this debate, you must read Rabindranath Tagore, where he brings out beautifully how nationalism sometimes can become enemy of humanism. That's at a philosophical level. At a more down-to-earth level, there's an example which I gave in some other webinar I recall. You see, in Ireland, Ireland is a Catholic country. Abortion is illegal. And the punishment for doing abortion is very severe. In India, medical termination of pregnancy, till, if I remember, 12 weeks of pregnancy is legal. But in Ireland, it is illegal. A newborn fetus cannot be aborted. There was a case which happened about 4 or 5 years of an Indian couple who became ill, complicated pregnancy, and she was in a hospital in Ireland, seen, examined by a number of doctors, and the only method of saving the lady was to abort the child, abort the baby. But no doctor will do it because it is illegal. And finally, that lady, Indian lady, died. It was legally correct, but ethically wrong. It did create a lot of protests in Ireland. They did change the law, but they didn't make it too simple. They said, okay, a committee consisting of this and a second committee. If 2 committees certify that aborting the child is the only method in that medical case, you should allow that. So to the extent that public opinion after that lady died did make them change the law somewhat. I think this tells you the difference between legal and ethical. Ethical is always a much, much higher concept. Being legally correct, good governance, it's sufficient if you're legally correct. But if you're a statesman, a high leader of statesmanship, he will also be ethically correct. He will not permit certain things just because the law permits it. No, we can't do this. This is not done. You see, let me give an example of that also on the political sphere. Around 1968, 69, there were a number of student agitations in many of the European capitals, particularly in France. Sorbonne University, which is one of the famous universities even now in Paris, students were protesting. In many other universities, they were protesting. The protest started because of the Vietnam War, the unnecessary Vietnam War, where a number of people were getting killed, etc., etc. It became into a complete student protest. So there was a very famous philosopher in France, a living philosopher at that time, name is Jean-Paul Sartre. He was living along with Simone de Beauvoir. Both of them, Simone de Beauvoir has written this book called The Second Sex. So Jean-Paul Sartre was a great philosopher. The French cabinet and Jean-Paul Sartre was supporting the students in this agitation. So the French cabinet passed a resolution that we should arrest Jean-Paul Sartre. But in France, these kinds of resolutions needed the approval of the president of France. And Charles de Gaulle was the president of France. When with this unanimous decision of the cabinet, the French cabinet went to Charles de Gaulle saying that this is the unanimous view of the cabinet. His reaction was, you can't arrest Voltaire. Voltaire is a huge, Voltaire is to France like what Adi Shankara is in India or Swami Vivekananda is in India. And Jean-Paul Sartre, the living philosopher, was comparable to Voltaire. So de Gaulle said, you can't arrest Voltaire. Who are we? Myself, the president or the cabinet, in front of him. No, he refused permission. That is statesmanship. That is ethical governance. I hope it answers that question.
Yes, sir. Absolutely. Thank you, sir. Now I would like to proceed with the vote of thanks because of the time constraints that we have. I would like to express my vote of thanks and gratitude to all the attendees for attending this very informative webinar today. I would like to thank Mr. VP Raja sir and Mr. MR Reddy sir for spending some time with us and enlightening us about the agenda. I would like to extend my thanks to the trustees of PCGT present here, our speakers, as well as Mr. Julio Rivera sir. Further, I would like to thank the dignitaries of Vaze College, Dr. VP Sharma sir, who is the principal, Vice Principal Dr. Preeta Nilesh ma'am, our mentors and Head of Department of Political Science, Mrs. Shilpa Suryavanshi ma'am, Ms. Vishakha Patil ma'am, and from Junior College, Ms. Sangeeta Aher ma'am, and Mrs. Rita Kamble ma'am, who have supported us and encouraged us throughout. Thank you. By this, we end today's seminar. Hope to see you in our future events.